Here we go.
The computer's like not working at all. Dun dun. That was my Law and Order voice.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Well, that was actually pretty good.
Executive producer Dick Wolf.
What a name, man. That man had a name meant for television. Welcome. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is the Free Rotation podcast. Hey, we're back again, bitches. I would never say that in a real courtroom, by the way. And I'm joined with Angie.
Hello.
And Chris.
Hey guys and gals and vowels and everything in between.
Everything in the tween. So, yeah, we are continuing with our, finally getting back to our saga, part 2 of the Atlanta child murders, where we are talking about the trial, the state of Georgia versus Wayne Williams.
Dun, 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 dun.
So I'm really excited. I was telling Angie before we started, this is my bread and butter. This is the stuff I work with every day. Even though people are always kind of surprised that I'm an actual attorney, I have been a trial attorney for nearly 10 years. So I'm down to get into this. I don't know if I really ever talked about being I'm a prosecutor, if anybody actually
She's
didn't
never
know.
talked about it.
I don't think I
I
don't think I really ever extensively talked about it. But the fact is that I have tried murder cases and domestic violence cases and all that stuff. So this is going into the stuff that I deal with day to day. So I'm really excited to get into it. So I told Angie and Chris the way we want to kind of do this is I'm going to present you the evidence as if you were the juror, ladies and gentlemen. And you are going to hear some of the evidence that was presented in 1982.
Guilty.
Just like most people in 1982. Very prosecutorial based. I wish I lived in 1982 because that's not how it is anymore. But we're going to present the evidence as it was presented in 1982. Talk a little bit about the trial itself. It was a 2-month trial. So we're going to kind of condense it down to, what was the highlights of the trial itself.
Are you sure we can't drag this out for 2 months?
We could
and
try.
Go word for word.
Listen, when I barely make it through 4 days of trial, by the end of it, I'm ready to gouge my eyes out and consider maybe squatting on somebody's land and just taking it over. So the fact that this went on for 2 months, just squatting on it. Just taking a big old squat.
You doing a squat.
Yeah.
It's mine now.
It's mine now, bitches.
This is how you claim
So for
land.
it to be
Her butt's too strong. We can't have the land back.
Her thigh muscles are amazing.
I protect these lands with my thick ass thighs. This is mine now. But for it to last 2 months, my brain would have literally exploded. So I'm going to present it as it was presented in 1982. And then we're going to talk about whether you would think that you would find him guilty. The standard of proof in Georgia, and anybody who listens, I don't know what the standard is outside of the United States, but we have beyond a reasonable doubt. And the standard for beyond a reasonable doubt in Georgia is it is a fair and impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. It does not have to be beyond all doubt.
Guilty. Oh, I'm fair and impartial.
Yeah. It does not have to be beyond all doubt, but just as a fair and impartial juror honestly seeking the truth, it does not have to meet a mathematical certainty. It just has to be your common sense if you were presented with the evidence. So we're going to start there, and then afterwards we're going to talk a little bit about what happened, because there was a lot that has happened in the last 30 years since this trial. So maybe you would not find him guilty or not guilty after 30 years. So let's get into it. All right. So just as a refresher, Wayne Williams was arrested in June 21st of 1981 after a string of what they were called the Atlanta child murders had occurred. This included younger children under the age of 15 and then several adults that were later added as part of the Atlanta child murders. Wayne Williams in May of 1981 became a suspect after a FBI agent who had been scouting the bridges in the better part of Atlanta had heard what sounded like a splash. And they go and investigate, and they see a car driving by on this bridge at 3 o'clock in the morning. Makes no sense why this car is out here on this bridge at that night. And they find Wayne Williams. Getting into it, subsequent to that, about 2 days after the incident with Wayne Williams, they find a body at that bridge. It's the body of Nathaniel Cater. He is a 27-year-old man who had gone missing 4 days prior to his body being found. At the time in which he was found, the coroner determined that it was probable asphyxiation, but they were not able to conclusively say that based on the deterioration of the body. You got to remember, in Georgia, it gets real hot. And you put a body in water, it's going to decay extremely quickly.
Well, it's going to decay. There's going to be animal predation. It's going to bloat. it's hot and muggy here, and we have a lot of things in the water that like to eat meat. So it just is what it is.
Right. So as they start to investigate Wayne Williams, there's inconsistencies with his statements. We talked a little bit about it last episode about where he had said he was going that night. They were never able to find that alleged woman that he was going to speak to. And he did do polygraph tests, and he failed all of them. So here's the thing. I will say this. Polygraph tests aren't really used anymore because they can be inconsistent. But at the time of the investigation, they did find that him failing 3 polygraph tests, plus the fact that he had very inconsistent statements about his whereabouts that night, kind of led them to make him the focal point of this. The other person that he was attributed to murdering in his trial was a man by the name of Jimmy Ray Payne. He was also found to have fibers that were linked to Wayne Williams. So they were able to link them together in order to bring this trial.
Because it's pretty rare fibers, right?
Yes.
They
so
weren't found a lot.
The way they described these fibers is that they were yellow-green nylon fibers with a violet acetate, like, consistently. And as they investigated it, it came from a fiber company called West Point Pepperell. And there was a limited amount made at that time.
They used to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was linked back to the fact that the probability of having these fibers in your home was 1 in nearly 7 or 8,000. So it was a high probability that whoever had these fibers in the home and they were on these bodies was probably the person committing these crimes. So let's get to the trial. In January of 1982, Wayne Williams is brought to trial. It is very important to note he is brought to trial on 2 murders, Jimmy Ray Payne and Nathaniel Cater.
Who are both adults, right?
They are both adults. He is not tried for any of the other 26 cases that are linked to the Atlanta child murders. So they bring the case forward in Fulton County, and it is a 2-month-long trial. Most consistent thing that is brought forward is the fiber evidence. And this is what kind of spurns the idea of using what we call pattern case evidence, which they took 10 other cases involving the Atlanta child murders and brought it to court as evidence of consistencies of him committing these crimes and the fact that they could link him all to these crimes. So the way it worked is that there was fiber found on at least 10 of these bodies that was consistent with Wayne Williams's, the fibers found in Wayne Williams's home. They were not at part of the trial. They were just evidence used in exacerbation of the evidence toward these two for these 2 cases. The biggest thing was this fiber evidence, but there was a ton of witness testimony as well. There's witness testimony talking about Williams having aggressive sexual advances on men. If you don't know, Wayne Williams is an outwardly gay man, and he had been in the scene of, the homosexual scene and all that stuff. So they attributed to Nathaniel Cater that he was seen. One of the witnesses saw him one night at the Rialto right before Cater went missing. Wayne Williams was holding hands with him and they were leaving. And that was the last time Cater had been seen. They had testimony about that. There was also testimony that Wayne Williams also was considered extremely racist against poor black children. It was a friend of his that told law enforcement that he would confess if there was enough evidence against him to attribute him to these murders. Mm-hmm. So she's held that stance for years that she completely believes that he's guilty of it. There was also evidence of witness statements about the inconsistencies of his whereabouts. Wayne Williams went back and forth throughout the time in which this case was pending before his trial. He stated that law enforcement was just kind of looking for the black boogeyman. He was innocent. He was not involved in any of this, and he had made statements about where he had been located that night. Law enforcement was able to determine a lot of his statements were inconsistent with that. Like I stated previously, though, the biggest thing that they brought was this fiber evidence. They had GBI testify, they had FBI testify. It was all these different fiber examiners who were able to determine that the consistency with the fibers found in Wayne Williams' home was similar to the ones that were found on the 10 victims, plus Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne.
And were the fibers carpet or?
It was all different kinds. We had carpet fiber, we had bed fiber, we had dog hair, and their pillow fibers. It was just it was a ton of fibers from this specific place that it was too hard not to attribute to him because it was all over his house. It was they weren't found in other places of the victims' homes or anything like that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if they ever really investigated the homes of the people who went missing as well and said, hey, these fibers are also consistent in their home, because if anything, it's possible that they could have had it in their home if it was a local manufacturer.
Well, not only that, but you also look at it was a local manufacturer, but they also kind of lived in like the poor side of town. Mm-hmm. And if there was like a Dollar General or a thrift store, like a Family Dollar or whatever, that carried that brand of bathroom mats or shawls or anything made out of that fiber.
And I think it was even in like some people's trunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that carpet. Remember that shag carpet that would be in your trunk and stuff?
It could have just been everybody bought that crap because, again, 1 in 8,000 is not a very high number of probability.
Right. It was.
Did you commit a murder?
I mean, there are ways you can always describe it to me if you were trying to prove your case or not prove it. You can say 1 in 8,000. That's really rare. You don't see that as much. If you are also a defense attorney, you can say this is not 1 to 10,000. It's not 1 to 100,000.
Well, even 1 in 8,000 is not. I mean, we look at where we live. That's not super uncommon.
No.
I mean, it's really not. And I do wonder, was this just happen to be fibers that were made by this company that happened to have a deal with Family Dollar?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, also, the Georgia Police Department in 1982 probably doing the investigation of a gay black guy who's
a little bit more leaning toward that guy doing it in a hard stance all the way around.
This is also, I mean, if you've ever seen In the Heat of the Night and stuff, that's the South in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, legitimately, 2 witnesses stated that he had aggressive sexual tendencies toward men. How do you... In this day and age, which I get, we're not in this day and age. You would not be able to just bring that up hey, he's super aggressive toward other men. It's that's not contributing toward any sort of fact finding.
You know who else is aggressive? Every 17-year-old boy I've ever met.
Yeah,
women if they're hetero, they just are what they are.
Yeah, it's just it was a case that I truly, and we can talk about it a little bit after the evidence is closed. But I truly believe this was a case built. It was built with the iceberg, the foundation of it being this fiber evidence, and then just throwing as much stuff as they can on top of it.
And again, I won't say that I don't think he's guilty just because they didn't do a good job. It can be both things. He could be guilty and they did a piss poor job because they were pretty sure he was guilty.
Right. That's absolutely the truth. After all of this evidence is presented, in the United States, you have the right to testify at your own trial. You do not have to testify because the burden of proof always falls on the prosecutor.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5th.
Yeah, it's the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to never to testify in your case. Basically, if you were ever in a jury trial in the United States, you are charged by the judge, and they state that if the defense presents no evidence, you cannot use that as a reason why he's guilty.
Yeah.
Because the burden of proof lies on the state regardless.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Even if I were picked up right now because somehow they thought I might have done something, even though I'm innocent, I would still call a lawyer first.
Right away.
Yes.
You were never going to be... Well, she said she was at Kroger at 2 p.m., so therefore...
Yeah, we really... I know a lot of people use this as why would you call a lawyer if you're not guilty? I will tell you this, in the history of the legal system, there have been false confessions. There have been abuse of power from law enforcement regarding it. We have stringent rules when it comes to interrogation now because of the past way interrogations had gone through.
And false confession is a very common thing.
It is.
I've actually researched a little bit of that when they put you in a room and they sit you there for 6 hours and don't feed you, don't give you water, and they're constantly bombarding you with questions. Mm-hmm. Basically, your brain will switch to basically an obedience mode where you're if I just say this, I can get out of here and then I can prove I didn't do it later.
Yeah.
Which, don't ever do that.
Yeah.
Never say you did it.
I'll tell you, we have, in any confession we have what's called a Jackson-Ditto hearing. And there's about 20 to 25 questions we have to ask law enforcement. And it's about the free and voluntarily given confession. And that's all because in the past, we've had people who've had false confessions. people who were basically abused during the time in which they were in an interrogation just to get a confession.
Yeah. And let me tell you, if you crank the heat up to like in the 80s or 90s, I'm probably at some point going to break. That is my weakness. I don't want to be hot and sweaty.
Yeah.
And my boobs are way too big to be that hot and sweaty.
Right.
Like, I'll probably be like, yeah, fuck it, I did it.
AJ's going to confess and be sent to a work farm in southern Mississippi.
Oh
and
my
Yeah.
god.
this is worse!
That is my luck.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing.
Digging holes, like the movie Holes.
Yeah, there are, and I'll say this, there are circumstances where if you are making an affirmative defense, like self-defense, you have to testify. Like, if the state is presenting a case in which you are the aggressor of a case, and then your defense attorney comes back and says, he stated that he was defending himself, you have to be able to present evidence that you are defending yourself. Otherwise, you can't disprove a fact that has been put into evidence. So there are times which we always say, hey, the defendant has to testify or it's just done. There's no way you can't say this. But in most murder cases, especially a whodunit, I will 100% agree with defense attorneys that your person does not need to testify. Lawyers are trained to cross-examine people, especially trial lawyers, especially experienced prosecutors. I have made this joke for years that, like, my boss and some of my coworkers, one day I want to grow up to be them. Because you sit there and, we just had a murder trial in March, I think, and my senior assistant DA was actually doing the cross-examination of the defendant, and at the very end of it, it was like, you cannot find that this woman did this in self-defense. There's no way. The way he extracted just information out of her that was inconsistent with her confession anyways, and then the facts of stuff she said offhandedly, you just come off like a jackass on the stand. So I am 100% against people testifying if they don't have to testify.
Yeah, and that would totally be me. They'd be like, oh yeah, you said you killed in self-defense, and I probably would have killed in self-defense. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
shake
just
the
never
8 ball,
know.
answer unclear.
Right.
But they'd be like, is it true that you thought, this guy was a grade A asshole and the world would be better off without him? Yeah, I mean, that is true. That's why we were fighting in the first goddamn place.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a back and forth. So,
The less you say, the better.
yeah, the less you say, the better. And under this circumstance, his attorney, or Wayne Williams' attorney, did state that she believed he should not testify. She went back and forth with him. But if you understand the context of the case at the time, Wayne Williams, and he has stated this in interviews now, that he was a stupid kid who made really stupid decisions. He thought he could beat the system. He said that before. He said, I just was so in belief of my own innocence that there's nobody else who's going to believe that I did this. So he made statements to the public. He made statements in interviews prior to his trial. And at the time in which he is called for testimony, his attorney tells him don't do it, but he still does it. He gets on the stand, and it's my understanding is at the time of direct, which is when your attorney is doing the examination of you on the stand. He was fine, answered a lot of questions, seemed pretty normal, nothing like that. But that's going to be questions that he's prepared for and exactly
is comfortable with.
Now, when he gets on cross and the state is questioning him, after a little bit of time, he starts getting angry. And at one point, he has a huge outburst, and he says, you want the real Wayne Williams? Well, here's the real Wayne Williams.
That's not good.
So, I mean...
Just the Wayne Williams that kills people.
Yeah. So, what...
The aggressive sex.
Yeah, aggressive mayonnaise.
Basically, that's just kink shaming. What is aggressive sex?
I mean...
I pull your hair? Like...
I don't know. He just said he was very aggressive toward men. I don't know what that
I
means.
could say Becky's very aggressive.
I call my wife. She's into that sort of thing.
Yeah, like...
Yeah.
And then somebody uses it against you?
Well, and I want to kind of get into this.
Not in a nice way?
I should mention this, because I'm a law nerd. In 1982, we are under a different evidentiary code. Georgia has its own evidentiary code, and it is quickly realized in the 21st century that this code is not very favorable to a impartial justice system. Actually, by the time when I started studying for the bar exam and going to law school, they were just switching the evidence code. This was 2013 to 2014. They switched it to the federal evidence code, which is more impartial. So I have prosecutors in the office who are a lot older who state that sometimes they get it mixed up because of the Georgia evidence code versus the new evidence code. I can 100% tell you this pattern case evidence would have never come in. It was not using evidence of other crimes that he has not been either not even charged with would not be allowed in a trial. You just can't do that now in this day and age. Anything about his aggressive stance toward men, that's character evidence that you have to use to show whether it's motive, intent, all this different stuff. Being aggressive toward in general does not mean that you're going to go murder somebody. I find myself to be aggressive in Valorant. There are people I would kill, but I generally would not just kill people for the fun of it. So it is fun. It is interesting to see that part. Like, I know, looking at me like,
I've seen her KD. She's not aggressive.
You're whatever. I play Sentinels. I'm a Sentinel player. Controllers. I don't play duelists. Anyways, so after 12 hours of deliberation, the jury comes back with a guilty verdict against Wayne Williams.
Yeah, he was fucked from the jump.
Yeah. So, and the biggest thing in the interviews that's stated by the jurors is that the thing that convinced him, it was not this fiber evidence. It wasn't anything to that extent. The inconsistencies in his actions, the witness testimony, it's the way he testified at the time he was on the stand.
Yeah, if I'm on the jury and I'm, people are like, he's aggressive, he turns aggressive and suddenly kills people, and all of a sudden you like freaking head spin like Reagan from Exorcist, vomit pea soup and say, here's the real one. I might be like,
did it.
You know what? I can't beyond a reasonable doubt say, you're not guilty.
Yeah,
right.
Clearly
Like, you
something
just
amiss.
proved like everything they're saying.
Yeah. So he was found guilty on February 27th, and he was sentenced to life in prison. It is stated, and we'll get into this a little bit, it's stated that after Williams was convicted, the murder stopped. I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. But he has maintained his innocence since. He's filed habeas corpus petitions. He's gone up to the Supreme Court of Georgia. Hey, there are judges on the Supreme Court, I think they're retired now, he actually is retired, that believe that Wayne Williams didn't do it, like based on the evidence and based on the extreme prejudice that was brought into the evidence at the time in which the trial was held. And here's the thing, at the very end of the trial, the 10 people who were attributed to the 10 children who were also attributed to being part of this, he was never charged with those cases at all. Matter of fact, there are still 26 murders that he was never charged with.
They were pinned on him.
But the cases were generally closed out because of it. But he was never actually charged. So, guys, now that I have presented a very generalized, condensed version,
Guilty.
I knew he was going to say that.
I told Becky, I was like, Chris going to say guilty. I'm going to be like, maybe not guilty.
Well, okay. So I could see it from there. Fair and impartial juror honestly seeking the truth.
Well, they did get a search warrant and find those same fibers in his house.
Yes.
There was also dog hairs.
Yes.
And like a couple of other things, but what do you call that? Where it's like
Circumstantial.
It's circumstantial. So beyond a reasonable doubt, no. Other than the splash.
So,
like what did you drop over there? Because they found a dead body where you dropped something.
That's the one that I'd be like, okay, it's 3 a.m.
Yeah.
They get his information. They find a body that they heard hit the water.
Mm-hmm. Now that one I would say guilty. The other one I would be a holdout.
Yeah. So you wouldn't say double homicide. You would say one
I'd
homicide.
say one homicide. Yeah.
Okay.
What about you, Chris?
I don't know the other.
Jimmy Ray
he was just found with him.
It was attributed to fiber evidence.
I would say guilty of one that I knew, and then the other one, I don't know.
Yeah. It's not beyond a
I
reasonable
need
doubt.
more information.
Yeah.
I will say this. I probably...
the body they found that he dropped off the bridge?
And the cops heard the splash? Yeah, you go into jail, buddy. Yeah. You did it. You did it.
And I would be more apt that if he did that one and it was the same, the information was very similar to the other body, probably be like, yeah, he probably did them both guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the subsequent things that were found based on the trial later, okay? It turns out in some of the murders that Wayne Williams was attributed to, but not necessarily brought as case pattern evidence, there were other suspects. In one case, we had a child who was murdered and found behind the dumpster of a laundromat. It's my understanding at that time, what the child had been actually interacting with what was found to be a sex offender who worked at the laundromat. There was witness testimony in which they stated that the last time they saw this child, he was with this guy. And then subsequently he was found dead. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with that. There are, I think, at least 2 other murders that they state was there were other suspects that were never investigated. So there is a lot of thought that maybe what happened was they were actually one and done murders, and that they were all attributed to the Atlanta child murders, but they weren't actually. There wasn't a serial killer. Yeah. 3 of the cases actually remain unsolved altogether. There's the 2 girls who were killed, and then 1 boy who has remained missing since.
And let's talk about the girls, because you're talking about majority black males.
Yeah.
Young black males, and suddenly these 2 girls get thrown in. Now, a sexual predilection doesn't just change because there's a girl available.
Right. And the thing is, like, if you're thinking that this is a serial killer with a pattern, and you're seeing consistently males asphyxiated, this is what you're attributing to Wayne Williams. You wouldn't see suddenly, hey, I'm going to go kill girls, especially if your idea is that he's an aggressive homosexual. Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And there's only 2 girls attributed to the Atlanta child murders.
And we're not really seeing in some of them, actually, I think most of them, any sort of sexual abuse beforehand.
Yeah.
Like, 1 boy was found with his pants gone, but there was nothing done to his body.
Right. So there's a lot of statements made that the murders are there are no further murders after Wayne Williams does it. But I'm wondering if what happens is because they've attributed all of these murders, when they start investigating again, they actually find the people who have committed these murders. If we're talking about one and done murders.
Well, and not only that, but you have, like, the African American community has formed a militia.
Yeah.
And they have started going out and doing vigilante justice to some people, and they're also watching and waiting for people. Now, you might be able to sneak around and snatch a kid, but if 3 neighbors are watching you,
there's more vigilance into watching what's happening with your children than
not
prior
saying that
to
they
this.
weren't vigilant before, but now you have, what do they say? It takes a village.
Well, and
you have a village watching your kids.
You do, but if you're
and
also
you have armed people
with serial killers, it doesn't matter. It's a compulsion they can't control. So it doesn't matter if there's 100 people watching.
Right, which is why I think
is.
that it was probably a bunch of one-offs. Like,
I do believe this. I 100% believe that they were a bunch of one-offs.
Even to this day, there's actually a foundation. Black and Native women go missing all the time, and you never hear about it. We even have one locally.
Yeah.
And nobody gives a crap.
Here's my thing, is that at the end of the day, we have several cases that are not investigated to the extent in which they should be, because they're attributed to the Atlanta child murders. There are witness statements in these case files about where these kids were last seen. They were last seen with a white guy. They were last seen with a sex offender. They were last seen with, I think it was actually 2 cases where there was a sex offender involved. And there's consistent witness statements about where these children were last seen, yet they have now all been attributed to the Atlanta child murders, and Wayne Williams just did it all. Because the general overview is we have to stop these people from being so pissed off about what's going on that we are going to attribute it.
And we definitely can't have it be, the white KKK guy.
Which I'm going to get into this in a minute. So just wait. This is all the things that happened subsequent. That was evidence that was found that could have helped him in his trial.
Okay, so represent it 30 years later.
So 30 years later, we're looking at
actually almost 40 now.
Yeah,
it's close to 40. It's like 35 years later.
It was 82, right?
Yeah.
It's 40 years.
It's 40 years later, yeah.
So here's where we get in 1985. We're in 1985. Wayne Williams was convicted 3 years prior to what is now an appeal for Wayne Williams. The appeals attorney receives a tip from a tip from an anonymous source. There are people who think it was actually a GBI guy that tipped him off, but that the GBI had been investigating KKK involvement, and that evidence actually had been closed out for the purpose of the Wayne Williams trial altogether. That in Georgia, what we have, in that it was never presented to either the state, or the state had it and never presented it to the defense. Now, just for a little more nerd legal background, any exculpatory evidence you may have in any case, you have to present in discovery to a defense attorney. That's the law. It's called a Brady violation. And it's it's a constitutional violation that you could lose your bar license over, especially if it's shown that you willfully did it. Bar complaints are filed daily on this because people believe that if there's exculpatory evidence that was purposely suppressed by the state that could have been used to show that the defendant didn't do it, you're basically violating somebody's constitutional rights. That's what it comes down to. So there's a tip brought to the appeals attorney, and with the investigation, it comes out there had been an investigation that a confidential informant had infiltrated a family with KKK connections and had recorded one of them admitting to killing a victim who was attributed to the Wayne Williams pattern evidence. And GBI admits that the recording had been destroyed while the trial was pending.
So it sucks, but I also look at it like he wasn't found guilty of the child murders.
Yeah.
Right, but that's what a lot of the but if you're using pattern evidence, so we're using pattern evidence to prove that this guy did this murder. What we're now saying is that one of the the kids in the pattern or whatever it was, there's direct contribution to the fact that this was KKK involvement. The problem I see there is that Wayne Williams is being touted as the Atlanta child murderer. The person that they're looking for somebody to be a scapegoat that they can close out all cases. So what basically that means is Wayne Williams goes to trial on these two guys. They can say that the Atlanta child murders can be attributed to him, close out the cases, no other investigation.
And here's the thing, on the jury, you're looking at this guy and you're like, he killed 26 fucking kids.
Yeah.
And they can't prove it yet. But they've got these two they can prove.
These two
Let's lock this motherfucker up
right
now.
You are using circumstantial evidence to prove that this man is guilty. That's what it comes down to. And you're being attributed to it. At that point, you're correct. You say, hey, you spent 2 years killing kids, just taking them off the street, you aggressive homosexual. So clearly you need to be locked up. But turns out that there is evidence, even if you're just throwing mud on the wall just to see what sticks, you have to just get reasonable doubt. You have to convince one juror on that jury to find him not guilty. The state has to meet its burden for 12 people. The defense only has to meet its burden for one person. If they could have used that evidence to prove it to one person, he was found not guilty. Yeah. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. So to me, that was
we're looking at this through our eyes too. In 82, it doesn't matter how it works. He was going to jail.
Well, let's continue on with what else was found. Now, this is really where you're going to be like, well, that's really like all the evidence. In 2014, a letter from the Department of Justice is issued that says at least one member of the FBI forensic lab was under investigation at that time for evidentiary mishandling. And the investigation showed a 30-year period where 90% of the lab hair and fiber cases had errors and 95% of the examiners had misleading testimony. Part of that being with the Wayne Williams trial.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying they should have stopped looking for the Atlanta child murders. It is real quink-eating that they stopped right after they arrested him. But he wasn't formally charged with it. He was found guilty of the
But now the fiber evidence they're using in his actual trial for these two people is now saying that
they
it's
proved
been
that
errored.
the carpet fibers were erroneous. Dog hairs match, but now you're like 1 in 30,000.
Yes.
So
now what you're looking at is the evidence that said that, hey, it is a rare probability that all of these people could have had just all of this fiber evidence on them. And it shows that Wayne Williams could be the only one that does it. There's evidence that the examiners lied on the stand. There's evidence that there was mishandling of the evidence. So now we have doubt about, and I get it, where you could talk about Nathaniel Cater being the one and done, but he was also convicted for Jimmy Ray Payne because of fiber evidence.
And again, we're saying they lied on the stand, which is not true. Misled people is a very different thing in legal terms than lying.
Doesn't matter. You can't mislead anybody. You have to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
If I'm the examiner and my lab tech told me, yep, it's the same, and I take those documents and say, this is what our labs came back with. That's what Chris is saying.
Yeah.
You didn't lie.
And they didn't intentionally lie. It's just a lab technician who was a fuck up.
Yeah.
Well, and remember the carpet fibers? You know where it did match? The KKK guy's car. That's how I knew those fibers were used in the trunk of a car.
Right.
So now you have like these interlocking circles.
Right. So so as stated in the last episode, there are a lot of victims of the parents of the victims who state that they don't believe Wayne Williams did it. Part of those victims are people who their case never even saw the light of day.
No one heard about him.
Nobody heard about him. They weren't even attributed as case pattern evidence. And they don't think that Atlanta did a good job investigating it. Even if you were to say that they were all connected or they weren't connected, they just want justice and they want to be able to have closure to their case. Having an overbroad statement that Wayne Williams is the one that did all of these and, hey, look, the murders just stopped. Atlanta was still the murder capital at that time. Key people were still getting murdered. But they feel like that there was not enough done to show that Wayne Williams did it. And what they wanted to see was Wayne Williams go to trial for their case and been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it. I get it. I mean, that's closure for people.
I mean, and this is still just, what was it, last year? Mayor Keisha Bottoms in Atlanta opened up the case again.
This is 2019.
This is her second time.
Yeah.
Because the first time they disproved the fibers but proved the dog hair. So now she wants to try and narrow it because she's still pushing for justice.
Yeah.
Whether it's him or not, but just a truth to come out.
Yeah, and Wayne Williams has maintained his innocence throughout the entirety. I think the next time he's up for parole is 2027. So he's been denied parole twice.
Until he explains why he was on that bridge with the splashing body.
He was never getting out of jail.
I think that I don't think he's ever denied killing Nathaniel Cater.
Yeah.
He's denied killing all of those kids.
All the kids. He's denied. You're right.
Yes.
He has never really said anything about the two men.
But like I said, Nathaniel Cater could have been a one and done. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jimmy Ray Payne, if you take the...
It honestly could be like a sexual mishap. Like, I was choking him during sex and... Oops.
Yeah, I killed him.
Crushed his little, tiny little throat bone.
And he should have known better not to dump bodies where people are getting dumped all the time for the Atlanta child murders. Mm-hmm. So now, with all of that information, if it was presented in a case in 2021, which I need to put in perspective, you would use the same evidence in 1982. You would use the same standards you would use in 1982. The prosecutor would have the discretion to use what evidence they thought was necessary. Do you think you would find him guilty of the Atlanta child murders?
No, not of the Atlanta child murders, but of the one dude.
Yep.
Yeah.
The one he was found guilty of, one of the two, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why I picked it as my unsolved crime.
Yeah, he was definitely their boogeyman for that. Mm-hmm. I just like there's circumstantial evidence, and sure it looks like it, but that doesn't mean it is. You didn't prove it beyond a doubt.
This has been such a controversial case in Atlanta, especially in our justice system, because there was a lot of judicial mishaps, which you attribute to the time and era. But, I mean, in this day and age, we have cold cases being solved. We have people being released because they've been shown to be not guilty, or the DNA evidence comes back later that shows they couldn't have done it. So we have to always re-examine these older cases, because what we had back then is not the same as what we have now. Hey, we solved a 20-year-old rape case because of 23andMe. So you have to keep going back and looking, because the idea is you would rather, in the judicial system, and I know some people don't agree with this, you would rather have one guilty man released than to have one innocent man incarcerated.
That's true. However, I don't think anyone thinks he's innocent.
No.
And if we locked up a murderer and kind of attributed some other murders to him, but that happened to stop after we locked him up for a murder we're pretty sure he committed,
have to think that
sounds like it works. It's a win-win for everybody.
But I also think we have to think it from our perspective, where we aren't involved in this case. I agree. I 100% think, hey, you got a guy who did something, and he needed to be locked up anyways. But I can understand it from the victim's parents.
Yeah, the parents want actual closure.
Yes.
But...
And why?
They'll never know.
They'll never
be
get
a
that.
why. Even when they catch murderers,
no,
there's not a why.
Yeah, it is very rare, and I'll say this in this day and age, and as somebody who prosecutes, we've talked about this before with victim cases. The victims always feel like there's never closure. They feel relief because there is an end,
justice,
but you've lost somebody.
Yeah.
And you will never get that person back. And the only thing you have is a little bit of relief knowing that the person who did it is now locked away somewhere. But you've lost that person for the rest of your life.
But if locking up someone you know committed at least one murder and probably two stopped someone else from killing another 10 kids, that seems like a win.
Well, but the question is whether that did it. I mean, if it's all one and done murders, hey, maybe after Wayne Williams was arrested, law enforcement was just more vigilant about investigating and actually found the person who did it.
That's a lot of one and done murders in a short span of time, though. Like, the numbers just don't add up. You can attribute a couple here and there, and that's what they did. They were like, this one and this one. But there's still 18 others that were all within 9 to 15-year-old African-American boys that all got murdered or went missing within, 9 months.
Well, I mean, here, 3 of them, They can't even. 2 of them were 2 girls.
Yeah.
One was a guy that never was even found again. There's 3 right there.
That's what I'm saying. Like you can separate some of them that they attributed to the Atlanta child murders because bad things happen every day. But it's just there's too many gone in too short of a span of time that fit a very particular set of criteria.
Yeah.
For it to be, just random.
Well, I just really think that I don't think he did it with those kids. I just don't see it. I don't think you could prove it. I don't think it's great that he's locked up on that. But I also understand from the perspective of the court system and the victims. As somebody who deals with victims every day, there's no closure. I get it. And I think it's kind of shitty because at the end of the day, you have no closure for it. And we've just kind of lost. Like I said, most people don't even know about these cases.
No.
Now, there is this weird theory proposed that one of the men who was killed was the child murderer. And Wayne Williams accidentally killed the child murderer when he killed him.
Hilarious. Well, then that's a perfect loop, and we're done.
I know. I was like, that would
Everything works out the way it should.
God did it as intended. Although I don't think that's the case. I think here's the thing you're going to find with a lot of the, I hate to say this, a lot of the black men of the time, they've all been arrested for something, and they've all been charged with something. Hey, that's Atlanta this day and age.
Well,
Most of them have been
3.
charged. Yeah, burglary, armed robberies.
33%.
Yep, that's exactly what it is here, and that's just it's just because the way crime is attributed. Unfortunately, we have progress, but we still don't have progress. We always say the law is 10 years behind real life. So I don't know if that's the case. I mean, it would be kind of an interesting theory. It's a kind of an interesting idea to think that, hey, Wayne Williams actually was the vigilante we needed, but fuck it, you got to go to jail, brother.
But I wonder if that theory doesn't, the backbone is in like the sexual deviancy of homosexuals also towards children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he just happened to kill a homosexual who also liked to murder children. Like, I wonder if that's not like the backbone of that idea.
Yeah. I don't know.
One of the strangest theories I read was that it was based on like how little strength was put into killing the kids. Like they were, one boy was strangled using shoelaces.
Yeah.
Because, and it's like, it didn't cut through his neck like if a grown man had done it, that there was actually another kid doing it. Or maybe it was like a gang initiation, but once again, you're looking at black boogeymen.
Yeah.
Like, stop attributing it to
stereotypes.
Yeah.
Like, all black gay guys aren't just derelicts. I mean,
Right.
they're just not. Like, it's
Right.
not what the real world is.
No.
But in 82,
In
everybody
82?
really saw it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if you weren't part of that community, you probably saw it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's all you'd ever been told or taught.
That's all you saw on the news. Don't
Yeah.
go to Atlanta. Especially if you're white, don't go to Atlanta.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about it. If there had been a string of white kids that were between 9 and 15,
Oh, man.
how much
more press coverage and pressure would there have been to solve all of
Quickly.
them? Yes.
I mean, let's perspective it. There was this 17-year-old kid who disappeared on prom night. And he didn't even really look for him. Found him murdered a couple of weeks later. And just down the road here from me, in the creek by the bridge. And we drove by his body every day. We smelled it. And I told Becky, I'm like, that's a human body. But I'm always paranoid like that. But it turned out it was a human body. But then there was a white kid who disappeared. And those cops they even pulled Becky over when we were going into the Summer Grove because, she had a white curly-haired white boy.
there's a white teenager missing.
Yeah. And we had Jeffrey in the back seat. So, they pulled us over and was like, are you okay, kid? He's like, I'm okay.
I'm 37 years old.
Yeah.
I've been smoking for years.
But you didn't see it, like... No, not that, Jeffrey.
And people... Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But, like, people forget what the South was like in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Especially...
Here's the thing. We're only, 10 to 15 years outside of civil rights movement. It's slow progress.
It is.
And I would say within the last 15 to 20 years, you've really seen that idea of progress with that. And even then, hey, we slide backwards a lot.
Well, yeah. But we're also dealing with, and this is true of the South in general, poor people are criminals. It just typically poor people are the ones that commit crime. In the South, more black people are poor than most other ethnicities.
Yep.
Because of history. I mean, it's what it is. So that's who if more poor people commit crimes and we have more poor black people here, you're going to arrest a lot more black people. That's just how the math works out. However, it doesn't mean all black people are criminals.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're all just bad people. It means that poor people do terrible shit sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true if you go to Brazil, it's the favelas or whatever. They will murder you for your shoes. It's not black people. They're just poor people.
Yeah.
It's how it is everywhere.
It's poor people. It's survival.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks, but it's just how... And here, that's who the majority of poor people are. When you go up into North Appalachia, West Virginia, it's white people that are terrifying.
Yeah.
Watch the Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia.
And I was going to say, if you look
Those people are all criminals and they're all horrible.
If you look at crime statistics going outside of Metro Atlanta, you have to remember Georgia is very rural outside of Atlanta and Savannah, Macon, and I think
south of Macon, it's all farm fields.
Yes.
I mean, it just is.
Anything, if you go east and west and between Macon and Savannah and anything south of Savannah, it's rural. So what you do see is a lot of poor white people committing a lot of crime.
Absolutely. But it's not metropolitan, so
but
you
it's
don't
not
hear about it.
Yeah, and if you only have like 600 people living in a county in Georgia,
no one cares.
Nobody's gonna give a shit. You have 3 people commit crime. That may be all 3 white people, but you have most of the people living in Atlanta. That's where you're going to be looking at your statistics.
Well, you got 2 million people that live there.
Yeah.
That is what it is. There's going to be more crime. It's also where everything is housed and all the news outlets are. And no one cares what happened in Butler County, Georgia yesterday.
I was going to say, most people aren't coming, if you're looking at tourism in Atlanta, most people aren't coming to Georgia to go to Crawford County, Georgia.
Hey, what happened in Waycross?
Yeah.
Nothing anyone cared about.
Did you see what happened when you went to Dublin and Atlanta?
What happened in Valdosta?
Yeah.
Peanut Screw. That's...
Yeah. There was an onion festival at one
point. There's the cotton picking fair.
I love going to Statesboro. I like to see the University of Southern Georgia and meth heads. That's literally it.
Yeah.
Let me drive right past it. But yeah, people forget.
And yes, we do still have the cotton picking festival. So
we do. It's called the Cotton Picking Fair. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, I apologize.
Happens right down the road.
Yes,
from
not a
my
festival.
house.
It's just a fair.
My grandma used to call it the gay fair. Well, because it happens in gay Georgia.
Oh, that makes sense.
So when I was younger, my grandma would call me and be like, "Hey, you want to go to the gay fair?" I'd be like, "I do not, Grandma. That sounds awful."
Well, that sounds like Pride Festival. Sounds like a great time.
Yeah. She's like, "You know what I mean?" I'm like, "Sure, let's go."
Let's go, Granny.
As much as we were talking
rainbow hair.
as much as we were talking shit about our own state, hey, it's a pretty cool place to live.
It's there have been so many drastic changes that it's not.
It is not anything like it was.
What you have your stereotype of Georgia, that place doesn't really exist anymore until you get to those really far out places.
We call ourselves, we are extremely purple. When we say that, it means that we're red and blue.
Yeah, together.
Because we're not necessarily a straight up Republican state anymore. We're very Democratic as well. You have to understand that most of the blue of our state lives in Atlanta and in the metropolitan areas, and then we have the rural red area.
Yeah,
so we do have quite the cornucopia of people who live
here. It is, but it's not like it used to be. Like,
no,
you can go anywhere and there's a mix of everybody.
Yeah,
no one cares. It's just, I don't know. I look at what the South used to be and what it is today, and I try to tell people, like, it's not what your idea of what Georgia is. Come enjoy it for a week, and there's infinite good food and places to see, and you're gonna never want to leave.
I will say this: it's funny when people don't realize this. If Blue Ridge, which is in the North Georgia at the foothills of the Appalachians, okay, you would think very podunk, very like. It is considered the gayest friendly city in Georgia.
They know how to make money.
They know,
They are very savvy.
Yeah.
I guarantee
they
you.
They love their gays.
A lot of those people around there actually don't, but gays have money.
Well,
we don't have a lot of kids.
You're dealing with a very high-end boutique area that is set in the. It's gorgeous around there.
Yeah.
There are cabins. It's pet friendly. I mean, you can walk your dogs.
It's the last bastion of the wilderness.
I mean, you have appealed to every aspect of the gays.
Well, it's just nice.
Yeah.
I'm not
the
gay.
gays, the
that
pagans.
Place is just nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, and you see a lot of, I mean, and there are some real like podunky North Georgia cities, but if you're looking at the context of Georgia and say, you would think Blue Ridge, if you did not live here and did not know Blue Ridge, you would think, oh, that's just a mountain town, kind of like West Virginia.
Yeah, because you drive through LJ, which is exactly what you think it is.
Hey, they got a Starbucks.
They've got a Starbucks, and they also have a church trying to kill trans people right now.
That is absolutely the truth, I guess. But you know what? Cornucopia of people in Georgia.
Do they have a Das Kaffee House? because I love that.
Oh
place.
yeah, that place is bomb.
Yeah.
That place
Yeah.
bomb.
Dragon Con, that's where we love to go.
No, the place in Blue Ridge, the coffee house.
Das Cafe House.
Oh. I thought there was one in the Mall of Atlanta.
I get their mocha and it makes my heart so happy.
No, you're thinking of Caribou.
I thought there was another one.
Mm-mm.
But no, there are, like, seriously, if you go to Blue Ridge, there are metaphysical stores and...
A birdseed store.
There's a ton of witches in Blue Ridge.
There are a ton. Birdseed stores and crystals, and it's a
My
fudge.
my favorite part is the metaphysical store is across the street from the extremely GOP friendly.
Yeah, but it's on one side. It's like pro Trump
Mountain.
one side, pro weed the other.
I
And
know.
you're like, you guys are
and
really...
sometimes they're the same fucking store.
Yeah.
Like that mountain.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that mountain store.
The
You
Mountain
go in
Mall
and
or
it's like
whatever.
Biden is
Yeah.
the problem. Let's go Brandon. And then there's a sign next to it that says legalize weed, and it's like,
They're
where
really,
am I?
they're really appealing to everybody.
They're making
Yeah.
their money the best they can. But like I said, if you have never been to Georgia, I feel like now we're like the tourism
And that's where I
ad.
picked up Julio Jones' rookie card. So,
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can't complain. If you ever want to visit Georgia, it is very different than the time in which we were talking about. I wanted to cover this because it is an unsolved crime, in my opinion. Even though somebody has been found guilty, it is not, by all means, the end of the story.
Well, and next week, we're going to do another unsolved crime.
Wait, that's Gangsta's Paradise.
Wow.
As
So
I
you're doing
walk through
You, I don't know what you
No, I was trying to do as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Not even
I
him.
take a look.
Yeah,
through
that's
my-
Coolio. That's a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
different
My
guy.
bad. Isn't
Whole
that just a dangerous mind?
Becky's the stereotype,
Well,
though.
that was Michelle Pfeiffer. How are you the whitest white girl and you're brown? This is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I love Gangsta's Paradise. I think it really.
Ooh, okay.
Only the Weird Al version, though. I only listen to white people music.
Oh,
Anyway.
Amish Paradise.
But we are going to look into the Tupac and Biggie murders. Disappearances.
Suge Knight. Suge Knight had them both killed.
Well,
Okay, I'm really gonna. I'll be honest with you. I am the whitest person here. I don't know a lot about them. I know they were killed. I know they're unsolved. That's all I know.
They're not unsolved.
Teach me.
Suge Knight.
on paper, they're unsolved.
The guy who threatened to throw Vanilla Ice off a rooftop did it.
Well, okay. So what we're saying, like the Atlanta child murders, they are unsolved, but there is a suspect.
It's like the Nicole Goldman murders.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
I mean,
unsolved.
I thought about doing that one, to be fair.
Yeah.
I really did.
We don't know who did it.
But if he
Let's
did
soak
do
this
it,
glove in hot water all night.
The balls to create a book this if I did
know.
it.
If the
Ugh.
glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Oh, that's
Oh my god.
Johnny Cochran.
Technically, you could also do Casey Anthony if you thought about it,
Yeah.
because she was technically unsolved as well.
Yeah. Actually, Casey Anthony would be a good one because,
I feel like it's just been overcovered. I really thought
Yeah.
I think we did a good job covering
okay,
things.
it's been covered, but have people really listened to the coverage? Like how the little girl was found.
Do they understand why she was found not guilty versus what
Exactly.
they look at it as a
They
travesty
couldn't
of
prove it
justice.
beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Because there was a very viable other option.
You know, like the web browser that they just didn't look at that had how do I bury a body or how do I kill a body?
Well, they're thinking that she, you know, it honestly is worth getting into because there is
Well, yeah,
an
I
entire
think we
thing.
could totally do a whole thing on it, but I do kind of like the Tupac Biggie idea.
I definitely want to do Tupac and Biggie
Yeah.
because Tupac, to me, he had the potential to be the next Malcolm X or, you know, yeah, I'd have to go with Malcolm X, not Martin Luther King Jr. He was very, very poetic and well-spoken, and he had lyrics and ideas that really went against.
He was a leader.
He was.
People forget that.
Yeah.
Also,
He wasn't.
on a side note, had he still been alive, Will Smith never would have slapped the shit out of Chris Rock because
Nope.
Jada would have been with Tupac still.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's true.
Throwing that out there.
Absolutely.
So we will get into
We're in
that.
the worst timeline.
It
Yeah.
is. Think about the alternative time, like the alternate timelines of things.
Tupac was a good man. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We'll present all the evidence.
So,
Or he may be like Ice Cube and making children's movies now, and you're like,
like Ice-T,
Ice Cube.
Ice Cube,
Yeah, Ice T's he's the guy from
SVU.
well,
Bum Bum.
yeah.
The Rock. I don't know. Hey, check us out at all of our favorite podcasting apps. Hey, we stream on
And
Twitch.
when you listen, be sure to rate us,
Yeah.
like, and review.
Hey, we have a Discord. Come join our Discord. We talk about other things, you know, like playing Valorant. That's really what we talk about.
Memes.
Yeah, memes and
Kitties.
stuff.
Kitty.
Yeah.
Kitty.
So, yeah, you know, we stream on Twitch. We upload our podcast on YouTube. We'll probably stream some stupid shit coming up. Probably like rando
Tomorrow,
nodding.
Random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I gotta go poop, so we're gonna end this now.
All right.
Bye,
Later.
everyone.
Peace out.
She's gonna have a nasty Becky.
Hashtag Wayne Williams didn't do it.
Hashtag he absolutely
Hashtag
did.
he deserves exactly where he's at.
Yeah.
That's
Bye.
true. Bye.
Hashtag he's clearly guilty, and fuck that guy.